Welcome to episode 6 of Conversations with a Martial Artist. My guest today is Debi Steven. I'm fortunate enough to work for her charity and do some work as a trainer for her. And her story is so interesting, so inspirational that I thought it's a very good one to share. Debi is a very accomplished martial artist, Shotokan Karate practitioner and instructor, has a very successful career with a number of schools and trainers. But more importantly, she works on Action Break Silence, a charity that she's founded. They work across the globe, here in the UK, India, South Africa, and they do some really important work stopping violence against women. Everything she does is very interesting, very inspirational. Her story herself, as you'll hear today, is very moving, and she's done a fantastic job of turning that into something very important and now educating the next generation and empowering women for their own safety moving forward. Fantastic conversation, really enjoyed talking to her. I hope you guys get as much out of it as you can. If you're listening in the first week that this goes out, she is actually in the middle of a big fundraising campaign for the charity, and a great way to show her some support would be to follow the Big Give, where every donation that you make will be doubled, and that all goes towards fundraising for the school. So please check out their website, actionbreaksilence.org. You'll see all of the details and the links there, and please go ahead and support this very, very important charity. Enjoy the episode. Debi, thank you very much for joining me. It's much appreciated. I wanted to have you on because you've got a super interesting background in terms of the martial side of things. But also then obviously you've spun off and your life has gone in a very specific direction off of the back of that. And you do a lot of really good work now with the charity, which obviously you'll have a chance to talk about. But I think it's something that's worth listening to and worth people hearing. So I thought it would be a very interesting one to have you on.
Awesome.
To start with, though, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the martial side of things. You are a karate practitioner and still instructor?
I instruct some classes, yeah.
Perfect. And what style of karate is that? 'Cause that's the one thing I've never asked.
Shotokan Karate.
Fantastic. And how long have you been doing that now then?
I started karate at 19 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 18 years old, 18 or 19 years old.
Sure.
It originally didn't do Shotokan.
Oh, okay.
I did 2 different styles in South Africa. The one I did the longest was a Shotokan-based style, because in South Africa, really interestingly, is that Japan tried to send, when Japan was sending all their big guns out to, across the world, they sent, I think it was Kanazawa Sensei, to South Africa. And because of apartheid, they wouldn't allow him in the country.
Oh,
and
wow.
so South Africa was robbed of that. We weren't robbed. The South African apartheid government, forced this.
Yeah.
But obviously we weren't able to have international instructors coming in that were non-white.
Right.
Which is tragic.
Yeah.
And so the style I spent a lot of my time doing in South Africa was a Shotokan-based style, which big difference is the kata in the style were South African kata. Okay. So very good on a certain level. Fine, you're living in South Africa, you're doing karate, but if you wanted to compete and you were any good at kata,
sure, it wouldn't
as
line
soon
up
as you went
with...
to competitions where they had qualifying kata being the big guns, Shotokan being one of them, we couldn't compete.
Right.
So even within South Africa, you could compete at a small level in kata, but not as you went into sort of more prestigious competitions.
Because it wouldn't line up with the Japanese version, I assume.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, and then when I moved to the UK 25 years ago, I made a decision, like I need to switch, I need to upgrade to an international style, because if students were going to train with me and they were traveling around the world, I wanted them to be able to carry their grades with them, not go through what I went through when I left South Africa the kata weren't recognized.
So you'd have to basically relearn everything
I had
with
to
the Japanese
relearn everything with the Shotokan kata.
So is the techniques largely the same, I assume?
Yeah.
I mean, there's only so much it varies.
Techniques largely the same. Kata very different.
Yeah.
Kata and grading syllabus very different. But general techniques similar.
Okay. Yeah. And so did you pick up the, I'll say official version, as it were, when you moved to the UK?
Yeah.
Okay. And then from there, that's still
that's what I do now. That's where my students are sitting, is within Shotokan Karate.
And then you've set up your own school as well, and then that's obviously blown up over the years. It's obviously become quite successful. When did you start teaching that style?
I opened Funakoshi Shotokan Karate, I think 22 years ago.
Okay.
So I, at the time, was in Nidan, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And I opened my first club, and it's a very funny story. It was in Kew Gardens, and I had one chronic alcoholic that felt sorry for me.
Okay.
So he joined my class, and one child who hated karate but was forced to come by his father, who was a friend of mine. So those are my first two students. And my first class, the alcoholic nearly died. He literally sweated alcohol, and eventually the little child that came, was pushed to come left.
Yeah.
But, as they say, the rest is history.
Wow, fair enough. That's a good start. Yeah. But it's obviously taken off, and you've got quite a few now different branches. I met a couple of your instructors as well. They now work for the charity as well, don't they? How many branches are you at now?
It's difficult to say branches because we teach at public venues where everyone can come. So we have dojos in Wimbledon, Kew Gardens, Teddington, Twickenham, Lambeth, Stockwell. So we have general publics, and then we teach at a lot of schools.
Sure.
So I think from a classes taught per week are over 50.
All right.
Students taught per week, students of 6 and above, maybe 500. Students between 4 and 5 years old, maybe 150.
Okay, wow, fantastic. Yeah, so it's a good size organisation.
It's a very big club, yeah.
Yeah. And how involved are you with the karate side of things now? Because obviously you've got a lot of the charity work, which I'm assuming swallows a lot of your time. But,
yeah, it was more than just the charity work. So probably 15 years ago, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and the symptoms were crippling. Like when I first got it, it was really, really crippling. Yeah, the arthritis. So there was time, at its worst, I walked into a class. At that time, I had a couple of instructors working with me, and I was going to teach, and I walked into a class, and as I saw the instructors, and they were used to me being like really efficient and very physical and very together, and I walked into the class to teach, and I looked at them and I just burst into tears, and I just said, I'm really sorry, but I'm in too much pain. And so that was to show you the level of where I was. It was really, really catastrophic. Luckily, I started building a team around me. This was before Action Break Silence, actually.
Sure.
I started building a team around me, and then went, at that time I was teaching full time, only karate.
Yeah.
And then as I got more and more involved in Action Break Silence, just before lockdown, I was out the country 7 months of the year. So a combination of being out the country and a combination of some of the pain associated with rheumatoid arthritis was difficult. And then probably for the last couple of years, obviously lockdown, and then since lockdown, I wasn't teaching karate at all, just because the charity I've set up a charity in South Africa, in India, and in the UK.
Yeah.
But also I was having extreme pain again. So like real difficulties walking down the stairs and stuff like that. The good news is somehow, with no Western intervention medicine, I've managed to pull my arthritis into back into into
Yeah, you were talking about this
control
last week.
again.
It's really interesting.
So I'm starting to train on my own again, which is really good. You
Wow.
obviously lose a lot of your confidence,
Sure.
which is, people out there will understand that when you're not on the floor doing karate. It's very different ripping your ears out or shoving my hands down the back of your throat. That's very different to traditional karate. But and I've also started teaching a couple of classes again, which I've really, really enjoyed.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah. Okay, amazing. And I think that's quite a nice segue to talk a little bit about then what you are doing with Action Break Silence, because I think there is a big misconception both for the martial artists of the world and non-martial artists about the self-defense element of things. And this is something that you and I really align on. I really like the stuff that you teach in the workshops. Would you talk a little bit about kind of your stance on that?
I think there's a lot of resistance out there, and it's a really turbulent time at the moment, because martial arts, generally speaking, particularly when you look at people in positions of power within clubs, is still very male dominated.
Sure, yeah.
And so we're also going through a huge change in masculinity and how men, particularly active men, alpha males, which are, of course, karate attracts a lot of those men, feel out of place, understandably. So I guess the reason I'm sharing that is that we have to be really clear when we're looking at the difference between what I'm doing in Action Break Silence and perhaps what martial artists are doing around self-defense.
Yes.
Without knocking any of the stuff that they do on a physical level, because again, I don't want, I'm not in the position to judge and mark and say what works and doesn't work. You know what I mean? Let's be really honest. A lot of things work. But what was very important for me, so from a physical point of view, if we left the physical totally out of the conversation and we said, we do very different physical to traditional martial arts, that's without any shadow of a doubt. But it's bigger than that. And I think one of the things that's missing when you're looking at self-defense directly associated with martial arts clubs is they're not actually unpacking what they're doing.
Yes.
And understanding, like, for me, it's just a general observation, having done this for years, is how is it that so many people out there, and it is predominantly men, that are teaching self-defense. Of course, there are people out there teaching all gender self-defense, but a lot of the men are teaching women's self-defense.
Yes, yeah.
And I find that interesting because none of them are teaching, that I know of, that are teaching men and addressing all the challenges that men might have and addressing the root causes of violence against women and having conversations way out of the physical.
Yeah.
Outside of, let's give you a bunch of rules and regulations of how you should behave as a woman to make sure that you don't get raped.
Yeah, absolutely. You get a lot of, I'll say, blanket advice of, you make sure you don't get too drunk, make sure, you can't wear this, you can't do that. And that can that's putting a lot of pressure the other direction rather than addressing.
It is. And there's two things. It's saying that kind of advice, first of all, is totally and utterly disempowering for women. To give us rules and regulations minimizes our ability to walk freely and behave in an authentic way. But also that kind of advice focuses very much on stranger danger. And of course, strangers or people unknown to the women that attack them. Of course, it can happen. We've just had Eliane's horrific murder. Murder. If you just look at the tragic murder of Eliane. So I think that's, it's not my job to tell people whether they're doing the right or wrong thing.
Yeah.
But what I do need as a woman is reassurance that people out there that are teaching women ask themselves the question, why women? Is it just because of the money? Or do you care?
Yeah, that is a big one, because there is definitely a factor of that where actually women's self-defense is a much bigger market than men's self-defense, because again, that masculinity, people go, well, no, I'm a tough guy, I know how to fight, I'm fine, I don't need any of that shit. But then women are a lot more screwed on to actually learning something.
But then also the thing is as well is that I'm not saying we can't all make a living out of this, because for much of my life, I had no university education. I had no really prospects of big career jobs. So I also make a living out of karate, teaching karate first and teaching self-defense. And now obviously it's much bigger. The charities are much bigger than that. But my thing is, even if you have to do this because you have to make money from it, great, amazing. But what are you doing free of charge?
Right.
What are you doing? What are you doing to help communities that can't afford your services?
Yeah.
So if you're teaching 10 workshops, 2 of those workshops should be taught free of charge. And you can do that right from the beginning. You don't need to wait until you've made X amount of money.
No, yeah, you don't need some big name. If you've got the right content, we'll say.
Yeah.
Then yeah.
But it's the right ethos, isn't it? It's actually looking at everyone as our sisters and family. Yeah. And making sure whatever you teach is accessible to everyone.
Yeah, especially look at that pure self-defense element. Again, take it away from the martial arts. If you're looking, actually, all I want to do is teach people to effectively be safe and defend themselves, then there is a much more moral component to that. Because there's loads of elements, like you go to, let's say, a Muay Thai gym. Very rarely do you find Muay Thai to go, oh, this is for self-defense. I'm teaching you guys Muay Thai to learn self-defense. It's a combat sport. It's got its own culture to it. It's really interesting. It's enjoyable. And that might be what people want. They want to go and they want to learn this art, whatever it would be. If you're looking purely self-defense, then yeah, there's a lot more factors you've got to consider. And like you say, there is a community aspect to it. You've got to have that desire to make people safer if you want to be teaching that, right?
But shouldn't we have the ethos, if even outside of what you and I do, Tom, shouldn't all human beings be giving back?
Very
irrespective of anything else.
Yeah.
Wouldn't the world be a much nicer place if all human beings realize you don't have to be rich to be philanthropic?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, very true. That's a harder one to to unpack there. You go a long way into that. But the stuff that you're doing with Action Break Silence, your charity, that I think is really, really powerful. And it's nice that you've moved in. And I've been lucky enough to work for you for now a couple of workshops and participate in this and see the effect. Because I will admit, I was kind of skeptical in the first workshop, especially a lot of it's with kids. Obviously, we do some adult bits as well, but primarily you're focused on schools, right? Yeah. And it's quite interesting to see how the kids at the start, as everyone at school has been, I was very guilty of it, of kind of not being that, I've got to go to this whatever workshop we're doing. What are we doing? Oh, yeah. Oh, I just want to go hit something at this workshop. To at the end of it, everyone's jumping up and screaming and really into it and really motivated. And it's so interesting to see, especially with the younger people, how the 1 or 2 hour workshop that you're doing can have such a huge impact. And some of the stories that you've told even in the workshops about how it's affected people later on is fascinating.
I think it is important to point out that when we're looking at the duration of the workshops, the 1 hour sessions are part of a package. So those students that are doing 1 hour sessions are doing 16 hours, 1 hour a week for 16 hours. And then obviously that's sort of a long-term intervention that we do with primary schools. And then when we're looking at empowerment through self-defense workshops and understanding masculinity workshops, those are between 2 or 3 hours, depending on the number of students in each group. And then with those workshops, actually, there are different levels of workshops. So people can come to level 1 workshop or level 2 workshop or workshop that's specifically looking much more at the physical. Some of them might be interested in looking at stuff to do with weapons. What happens if you go to the ground? What happens if you're choked out? You know, those kinds of things.
Yeah, the what ifs when it evolves from there. And at what point then did you really shift your focus from karate to the pure self-defense and that world, as it were?
I think I've done it right from the beginning.
Okay.
Maybe for the first 3 or 4 years, no. I was just doing karate. But I kept asking questions because the driver for me to do karate was the fact that I'm a survivor of 2 rapes when I was very young.
Yeah.
both of those by people that I knew. So even though it might not have been a conscious thing when I was training, because I was training really hard, I started competing really early on. I had a really great instructor at the time that spent loads of extra time with me. Whenever I wanted to train, he was basically there.
Right.
But I did keep asking myself, like, when I was raped and when the physical part of those rapes were happening, like, what would have worked?
Yeah.
And so that was my big thing. I kept asking questions about, like, would this actually work? And I was having issues with, like, distance and, location and environmental factors that aren't in a dojo. And also looking really at, like, a lot of emotional and psychological stuff. It's very different when you bow into somebody and you're fighting and someone's going, okay, stop, start, point, no point, what, to being in that situation where there are no rules and when you know the person, you know. So I think after that, I started teaching self-defense, and I was very guilty because a lot of the men that were teaching me self-defense were men. So I was just picking up their opinions.
That's where you came from. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was teaching that kind of self-defense. I used to give rules and regulations to women. I used to follow those rules and regulations myself, not realizing how disempowering it was. So really, probably, definitely by the time I'd come to the UK, I had kind of split. Okay, this is my karate business, and I'm developing it for this, and I love martial arts, and I believe in it, and I follow the Dojo-kun. I really am one of those people that believes in a never-ending pursuit of technique and a never-ending pursuit of character. But then I also neglected the fact that I also am very comfortable telling somebody to fuck off.
Yeah.
And I'm very comfortable ripping somebody's eye out. And that's quite a big thing for women to get their head around, not just women, but all people, all nice people, all genders, to understand that being nice comes with a set of criteria. When people stop meeting those criteria, you don't actually have to keep being nice. And I was having a conversation, and, I'm okay to say, well, let's sit down, let's have a conversation. I've known you for a very long time. Let's sort it out. But at what point do I say enough, Tom?
Yeah.
Like, at what point do I go, no, like, this isn't cool. Like, you can't treat me like this. You can't say this.
Yeah.
It's not a misunderstanding. This is a very horrible thing that you've said. So I think that that's also, when I started looking at all of these things that are happening, and you definitely, definitely as a woman, realizing the power of, like, boundary setting, realizing the importance of, core values, understanding that I'm in control and I can walk away from people, whether it's a intimate relationship, a friendship, or a business. I can actually walk away when I don't feel like I'm being treated with dignity and respect. And that's a really big thing for me, for all of us as human beings. All human beings should be able to, like, understand those things and action them and recognize what abuse actually looks like as well.
Yeah.
Abuse isn't necessarily I grab you, I punch you in the face. A lot of abuse doesn't happen like that. You're walking down the road and I blitz attack you and grab you and take you to the ground.
Yeah.
It doesn't really happen like that. Or I'm coming up to you and I'm, like, screaming at you. It doesn't happen like that. What if you and I have been in a relationship for 10 years? What if you're drunk? Yeah. What if I'm, like, saying no and you just carrying on? What about that? Yeah. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with the fact that you wake up in the morning and you can't remember, but you've raped me? Yeah. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that you guys do so well for the workshops that you do, is so much of it is, yes, obviously you have the physical element of it, but so much of that talk, that's what's so important and that's what's so different. And anytime you look at it, people have these, like, light bulb moments after you talk about this, because a lot of the times people won't think about those things, about actually do I know where my lines are? Do I know, what I am and am not comfortable with? How far can I go and things like that? And even the workshop that we did together last week, people saying that afterwards, going, I've never thought about that. And these are people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever. And it's an interesting one because it's such an important element of self-defense, that psychological side. But like you say, so many people, when you say self-defense, they see that shadowy figure in an alleyway that just jumps out and does X, Y, Z.
Perpetuated by language that the media uses.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, this monster.
Yeah.
And this predator attacked this innocent poor woman.
Yeah.
You know, and it's that language that makes perpetrators other people with an illness, or people out of control, or people from another community,
someone you don't know,
not just everyday people.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I think is so important for you guys, where you talk about the focus on, actually we'll do scenario attacks to get you used to the adrenaline and the scary side of the self-defense. But the message is always, actually, this isn't what it's like. Maybe one in, 50 times you might have something like that. But more often than not,
physical that we do, and the reason we do physical isn't to replicate some kind of 1 in a trillion kinds of different scenarios of how you attacked. We do physical self-defense for people. We obviously only teach physical self-defense for people identifying as women. All right. But we're doing that as a tool to empower those women.
Yes.
So we're saying, like, I know the whole world has told you that you need to behave and act in a certain way, but you can also rage, and you can also grab something and smash it.
Yeah. And
that's what you need. Like, and that, again, outside of Action Break Silence, before Action Break Silence, I taught all genders. And that was because I don't feel it's right for anyone to be attacked, physically attacked. I don't feel it's right for anyone to be discriminated against, for anyone to be made to feel less than. But for us as a charity, we focus specifically on making the world safer for women and girls because of the out of control statistics and case after case after case after case of women being sexually harassed, women being assaulted, women being financially abused, women being coerced, women being stalked, women being raped, women being murdered.
Yeah. And that's the thing. There's so much. It's a very dark world to get into. And a lot of the time people kind of want to bury their head in the sand to it. And I think that's probably an element of the othering of these bad guys, these shadowy figures that are going to be the ones that attack you. But the work that you guys do, talking about, it's the person that's going to be closest to you, it's someone you know, and things like that. And it's really interesting to see the impact when you tell your story to, especially some of the young girls in the girls' schools that you guys teach at, to see the impact on that, and the shock when you talk about some of the stories that you share and the techniques that you're doing when we're talking about, because everyone thinks, I want to punch them in the nose and someone falls over and I can run away and that's my self-defense. But the stuff that you do is pretty gnarly as someone that gets demoed on for it.
You felt the other side.
Oh yeah, it's no fun. I'd take a punch to the face any day over some of that stuff. But the techniques that you guys use, was that something that you specifically sought out? Is that something you learned from research?
So a lot of I have a couple of men that I've trained with over the years. I've had many men that I've trained with over the years, but a couple that I truly respect. And one of them is Richard Dimitri, who, back in, 2004 or something, I was the first UK person to go to Montreal.
I remember you said before,
go through his 10-day instructor course. And, it was terrifying.
I bet.
It was terrifying. I basically spent 10 days not sleeping because I was convinced, because he was so, at the time, reality based, that I was convinced that someone would knock at the door and I'd open him and it would be a blitz attack by one of his guys or 2 guys or 3 guys or something.
Yeah.
So it was very physical, but also the base of what we look at, like, should you have to go physical? Like the basis of that, understanding about stroking somebody's ego, about getting them to come into your flinch and bypassing for you to bypass their flinch. Closest tool to closest target, ripping into somebody's face. This isn't specifically owned by Richard Dimitri.
No, but
I just like the way he packaged it.
Sure.
I really like the way he packaged it. And so a lot of not a lot, but if I look at the influences of some of the stuff we're doing, not a huge amount, because we're talking specifically about physical self-defense.
Yes, that's very much one element.
And the behavioral delivery system behind that, which is a very small part of what Action Break Silence does. But Richard Dimitri was somebody that I really enjoyed training with. And, we're still very good friends. And the other person is a UK person, Dave Turton. And in the day, he was, he's just a legend of all legends. He was the head of the Self-Defense Federation. He's a hell of a nice guy. And so I did a lot of training, with him and his team. In those days, I was more than likely the only woman.
Yeah, sure. I bet.
And, I've been, so the training that I did when I was younger, is why I feel confident now. It was, very serious training. And the way I trained people there, I ran this training session in Southwest London, and I got a reputation because people would get physically ill that came to my session. They would all end up in the loo vomiting. And
right.
I'd have BB guns. I had BB guns. I'd shoot people. So it was a really great group that we trained with. Every week we did training, and we had like Russians coming, and they were vomiting in the toilets and everything. But that's how you trained in those days.
Yeah.
Whereas now I think things are starting to change.
Okay. In what way?
There's lots of people out there still training like that. So I'm not. I'm not offending anyone, but perhaps my focus has shifted a lot.
Sure.
And I still believe in all that hard physical training, and I still think it's very important for all people to be able to pressure test stuff and to be able to be in an environment where they can go crazy. I know I've been attacked pretty much flat out hundreds and hundreds of times by guys. I know that I felt pinned and that I couldn't move, and I've bitten someone's groin so hard that they've elevated off me screeching. So I know they know that works, and I know that works. I've ripped somebody's chunk of somebody's hair out with them not even responding.
I like that.
You know what I mean? And so I think all of that training is still happening, and I think it's good. And I miss it as well. I definitely miss it. But for me at the moment, we're looking at a much bigger. We're not looking at what can I do to teach you.
Yes. I'm
looking at what can we do to teach them, and how can we listen to them so we can teach a bigger group. And so I'm hopefully looking at taking stuff from being individual to actually looking at structural inequality.
Yeah.
And the drivers behind why was that guy so comfortable walking up to Ellie Ann and stabbing her? What happened to our society that this young guy is just so okay about that?
Yeah.
And that's a whole conversation. Like, what's happened to our legal system that people aren't nervous of the law?
Yeah.
What's happened? Why was this guy so entitled? Then looking at his side, why wasn't he able to process rejection in a normal, healthy way?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, again, something quite unique about what you guys do with ABS is a lot of it is very societal change. You're looking very long term, like the masculinity workshops that you guys are running. That's so interesting because I haven't seen that from a self-defense point of view anywhere else. It's a kind of the approaching the next generation and putting that foundation in now, with obviously the hopes that carries on through. How are you finding that at the moment? Because I think you changed that workshop fairly recently, didn't you?
We changed the title. So we had called it Toxic Masculinity, and for obvious reasons, we weren't calling it toxic because we thought all men were toxic. It was only listening to people coming, so many people commenting on it.
Yeah.
Then I realized, hang on a minute, this is being totally misunderstood.
Yeah.
What they're hearing when they're hearing toxic is they're going into red haze.
Yeah,
they're switching
their
off.
back up.
They're switching off, and they're immediately angry. But what we were saying is actually was quite empathetic towards masculinity.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's interesting.
And it was a realization of what the hell have we done to kids? Like, how have we brought children up? How much pressure is there to provide and protect? Like, how much pressure is there to somehow not ever cry? You know, and those kinds of things. And then I think a huge thing for me, Tom, was realizing how many young people are struggling.
Yeah.
They're struggling to be their authentic self in a world of so much judgment, so much pressure, 24 hours a day because of social media.
Yeah,
constantly on your phone, constantly reminding you that you're not enough. You know, and I think that that's something that drove us to changing the name of that workshop to Undefining Masculinity. And again, people that are seeing that red haze may come back again. But actually, what we're doing is we're saying, can each person just decide who they are?
Right.
Can you be exactly the kind of man you want to be?
Yeah.
Without any judgment from everyone else and without all the social pressures.
Yeah, no external.
And you just be who you want to be. You want to be an alpha man that goes to the gym, 7 days a week for 5 hours. Awesome and amazing.
Fine,
beautiful. Yeah. But then don't expect the next guy next to you or a trans woman or a lesbian woman to all be on the same page as you.
Yes.
And then comes in hate and discrimination and all that kind of stuff as well. Can we just stop hating each other?
Yeah. And then from there, obviously, that evolves into you guys looking at that more specific aspect of personal safety and violence against women.
Yeah. The stats are clear. Although we have huge empathy for all members of our community, the stats and research are clear. And it is overwhelmingly violence by men is put on women because they are women.
Yeah.
And that's overwhelming. So that we have to sort out. Why is it? Why is that happening?
And that's why you've got such a focus on doing workshops with schools, I guess, both boys and girls.
With all genders at schools,
Absolutely, yeah. So it's a really different way of approaching it, and it's very wholesome for one. And it's a very good long-term view, because I think, like you say, too many people will think you can just run in and go, right, here's how to throw a palm strike, here's how to gouge someone's eye out, off you pop, good luck. Whereas you guys are very much affecting the next generation.
And we really believe in young people. Young people, Oslo, who's an incredible philosopher, he sees young people as the generation of hope, and that I genuinely believe that. And so besides the fact that we need, if we're looking at societal change and we're looking at trying to change some of the social norms that are really harmful to many people around us, your root belief systems have to be addressed.
Yeah.
And those need to be addressed when you're in primary school, not when you're in secondary school.
Yeah, I suppose you're quite formed as a character already there. You're less malleable, as it were.
Exactly.
Interesting. Well, it is an amazing charity. I appreciate you have to shoot off in a couple of minutes. I appreciate you making the time. Where is the best place for people to go and support ABS? Because the work that you do, especially the free school stuff, is amazing, and everyone should be going to check that out and spreading the word, because getting you guys into the schools, every school that I've been to with you guys has loved it, and people always feed it back. So I think it's a big thing that needs spreading. Where's the best place?
The easier thing is just to basically look up actionbreaksilence.org. And then all our details are on the website for the different social media platforms. We're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. So we cover bases for all generations and all types of people.
Sure.
But I really appreciate, your time and that you're doing such a good work with your podcast. And I think this is a big thing, isn't it? It's us. It's being able to have these conversations in a nice, respectful way. This is how we learn from each other.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time, Debbie.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. And follow ABS.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you got to hear some of the inspirational work that Debi's been doing. Like I say, super important, and if you are still listening to this early days, please do check out actionbreaksilence.org. You'll find all the information up there. Please consider donating or recommending ABS out to a friend if you work in schools, and let's help spread the word for this amazing charity. Thank you very much to Debi, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I will see you on the next one.